Hi, folks. You were Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of wealth building and wealth creation, and the circumstances in which new wealth can be created and built. Now, typically, creation of new wealth involves collaboration. It can be collaboration between people of different levels of expertise, or who have expertise in the various areas that are necessary to develop a new technology or a new product or a new service or whatever, or people who are particularly industrious, people who have investment capital. It can involve a number of people, but the issue here is collaboration now, and spontaneous collaboration. Now, this is collaboration with people that you don't know. You've never met them before. You know nothing about them. They could all be axe murderers or not. So it's the capacity of people to get together and say, we'll agree on this objective, we'll agree on how we're going to get and achieve these objectives, we'll be all on the same page, we'll share the same goals, and so on. So the social trust, the personal trust that isn't there. You haven't known this person since you were in kindergarten. You haven't lived next door to them all your life. They're not a family member that in a close-knit family group or wider group. They're not directly from your community, as in if they're not next door, they're two doors down the road, and you know the people who know them, and this sort of thing. That's a different sort of personal trust, whereas social trust is something that's almost nationwide, or certainly community, class wide, and this sort of thing. So social trust involves vast swathes of the population trusting each other. Now, once that social trust is in place, you can get together and agree on your goals, objectives, methodologies, the purpose, how you're going to divide the spoils, all these sorts of things. Who's going to get paid what for and so on. So your trust is as part of, if you like, faith that the agreement will be adhered to. Okay, let's get these goals and objectives. Let's get on the same page. I have faith that you will deliver your end of the bargain. Now, is it a perfect thing that works 100% of the time? Of course not. It still can fall over and still can not meet expectations. It still can be that one person works harder than the other people, or one person is a slacker, or that still happens and can happen. But very often, everyone does collaborate and does agree on the goals and objectives, how to get there. And this is how great companies are founded. This is how, the likes of the Apple computers and all these sorts of things, why they happen in the West, uniquely so. Now, if you look at all the great inventions, certainly over the last few hundred years, with very rare exception, they've come out of the West. They've come out of high trust societies where spontaneous collaboration between people who've never met and know nothing about each other can get together to achieve those objectives. Now, when I first started business traveling, I assumed that collaboration, there was a baseline of collaboration, which more or less, give or take, was going to be somewhat the same all over the world. And I was surprised to see that in the poorer countries, spontaneous collaboration was almost zero. It just didn't happen between people who didn't know each other. Whereas in Western countries, not 100% of the time and 100% of everything, but in Western countries, I would only see spontaneous collaboration. So I could have a business meeting with someone I'd never met or known before, knew nothing about, they knew nothing about me. We could sit down and say, okay, here's the objective of our meeting. This is the purpose. This is how we're going to get to where we're going to go. And a business agreement or contract could be put together sometimes within hours. I mean, often it took longer than that, but it could happen quickly because there was an assumption that the parties would be acting in good faith. Now, again, it wasn't so 100% of the time. There were still issues in some places that there were paranoid, suspicious people. I mean, there always will be, but for the most part, that's how it went. Now, as soon as I stepped outside of the Anglo-Saxon Christian sort of thing, even amongst Jewish people in first world countries or other people, I'm talking back when I first started here, I found the level of trust was much lower. Not that it wasn't there or it couldn't be acquired or put together, but it was different. There just wasn't that sense of trust and faith in or the assumption of good faith in the other party. Well, certainly not to the same extent that it was outside of that. Now, you wonder why did the West become rich? Why is it rich? Why did it stay rich for a long time? And whilst the West is getting poorer rapidly, why was it able to stay rich for that amount of time compared to the others? There was a time when the Western countries, were represented 75-80% of the world wealth. Why is that? Now the folklore amongst the activists and the agitators was, well, the West is only rich because they stole everything. But the reality is, on a per capita basis, the West has been richer than the rest of the world for 500 plus years on a per capita basis. Now, if you look at, say, England before it acquired the empire, so this is 1500s type thing. If you look at that and you look at the per capita income around that time in England, compare it to the richest countries in the world that were only rich because of population mass and no other reason, India and China, total mass, then England, with its very small population at the time, was on a per capita basis, 25 to 35% richer than China or India. So it's been 500 plus years. Now that gap began to widen when the Europeans developed long ocean going technology, the ships to go to do trading, and then the merchant era arrived, and that the wealth gap started to widen. Then when the Industrial Revolution came along, you had the ridiculous thing where, England with a population of 15 million was richer than China with a population of 350 million. I mean, this was insane differentials in wealth and wealth creation, and that differential, well, not to that extent, of course, because China's industrializing as the West sent its industry off to China, but that wealth gap, stayed. The West has stayed the richest per capita, the richest countries in the world. Everybody wants to come to the West because of its riches. But the people who want to come to the West today come from very low trust societies, and they want to form their own little, religious or social communities with all their low trust and so on, and then just steal from the white taxpayer, loot the country, and which is how they behave in their homeland. And that's the model that even in India, the Brahmins just loot everything from the peasants. That's how they do it. That's their model, and you see this all over the third world. And why is the third world the third world? Why are impoverished countries? Because of this low social trust, complete lack of trust in institutions such as courts to uphold contract law and property ownership and so on. But also because the social trust level, you can't trust anyone outside of your family, your blood relatives. No one can be trusted. As much as anything, that's not per se trust. It means you can hold something over your family members. So if you're doing business with your cousin or your second cousin or something like that, as they often do in China and other places, you can hold something over them. If they screw you or if they fuck up or something like that, they're outcast. They're outcast from the family. No one will talk to them. No one will, they'll lose the support of the family and the wider family and so on, and they'll be screwed. They won't be able to get a job. They'll be fucked. So you can hold something over them, but someone who comes from outside of your family and outside of the community, you can't hold anything over them. They're not an immediate blood relative, as in, someone living in the same house like your children or your wife or something like that. So you have to, if you can't hold something over them, then you can't trust them, because there is no such thing as social trust. And, again, having been around the world many times for many years, doing business, I was staggered at the lack of social trust in these places. Even in places like, say, Hong Kong, which had been exposed for well over 100 years to Western, business practices, so on, even there, the social trust was very low. If they're taking your money, they're fine, but if in any other circumstances, they have no social trust at all. and they're unable to look objectively at any business offering or business deal or business contract. They just can't. They just can't. I can't trust you. I just can't trust you. So I can't even look at what's on the paper. That doesn't matter. It's just, and so they this inability to judge value, to judge the interaction, and to judge so on, just because the social trust, they've got no comprehension of social trust. Similarly, in places like India and dealing with Indians, they have no concept of wealth creation, as indeed many other places don't, by the way. I single Indians out because there's so fucking many of them, but and they're going everywhere around the world. And they bring their low social trust attitudes with them, by the way. And this is all destroying the West. The biggest intake of immigrants into Australia is Chinese and Indians, both from very low trust, zero social trust societies. And we're not instilling in them attitudes of social trust. They're changing the whole landscape in the first world, in Australia in this case, they're making us a low trust society. And that's a bad thing, and will have a huge impact on wealth creation. Well, it is now, but wealth creation today and wealth creation going forward. The Indians believe, and I've mentioned this many times before, that the world has a fixed pot of money. The only way you can get more is taking it from someone else. The best way to take it from someone else is to deceive them, to outwit them, to cheat them. And they believe that this is how it's done. Why would you not do it? Anyone that thinks otherwise is a fool. So they've got very different views and attitudes of doing business, and deception is key. And this was interestingly, like when the Europeans first started trading in India and doing business, the description that the European merchants had of the Indians back again, this is like 400 odd years ago, the description they had of the behaviors, the attitudes, the methodologies of cheating is exactly the same as it is today. Exactly the same. 400 years and the Indians haven't changed. As far as they're concerned, they have the right way of doing it. It's just those damn white folks that stole everything. I mean, what a load of bullshit. But coming back to this thing of social trust, and I was having a conversation with somebody just very recently, and talking about this attitude of spontaneous, or this capacity for spontaneous collaboration, and saying you only find it in the West. Now, it doesn't mean that say half a dozen family members of the Indian family or of the Chinese family, that they can't get together and collaborate. They can. But that's the only way that'll happen. So you don't get the skills, you don't get the capabilities. But if I see someone has the capability of doing such and such and so, then I say, wow, I don't have that skill. So if I'm going to create this product or this service, I need that person with that skill to do it. Why don't we collaborate and make it happen? Even though I don't know that person, I've never met them before, and vice versa. Because in a high trust society, you can collaborate and you can get together to create an outcome. But even like East Europeans, for example, have been behind the Iron Curtain during the communist era, and even still today. The East Europeans, they have, on a relative basis, very low attitudes of social trust. They understand how to cheat you and how to control you, how to hold something over you. That they understand. But spontaneous social trust and the faith that's required to agree on, all on the same page. Let's do this. Let's agree on the objectives and the goals and the so on. Then even there, it's much lower. Say Russians, Ukrainians, I don't know, Romanians, Poles, and that sort of thing. Very low levels of social trust relative to what it used. But as I say, social trust is being lost in the West, and I would argue. And quite clearly, I think the relationship is unmistakable. But once that social trust is gone, and it's disappearing quickly, and the ability of the West to create new wealth, to generate new wealth through social trust of institutions and just the miasma of social trust in society, once that's gone, it'll take decades, many decades, generations to get it back. And that's a great tragedy. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.